it because the microphone's just for the recording. So I look like I'm just standing here talking in the microphone for no reason. I'm going to try and make this still good because doing the same talk 4 times is challenging. And now it's the time where I'm actually being filmed doing it. So I'm going to try and make it hilarious and witty. So welcome to the Hoppy Station. When we divvied up who was going to do which beer, I was the only person on the Zoom call of the presenters. So I was like, I'm going to take the hoppy one. Thanks very much. I'll take the good stuff. We are tasting an IPA. How many of you have never tasted an IPA? Liars. Okay. So how many of you have tasted an IPA? So I'm just making sure people are paying attention, you know. Because a minute ago I asked like 4 questions, one of which is who's telling lies, and still everyone's just looking at me. What can you tell me about IPA? Anything that springs to mind? No wrong answers. Okay, it's bitter. Excellent, thank you. What else? Bitter. Hoppy, very important. Basically, you've just described the IPA. Well done, we'll finish now. Okay, what does it stand for? India Pale Ale. Not Indian Pale Ale. Indian Pale Ale, with an N on the end, is pale ale that's brewed by a craft brewery in India. That is an Indian Pale Ale. Sorry? Oh, great, yeah, we don't go into that. So India Pale Ale, we're not going to do a whole history lesson. I'm sure you've all heard the stories, some of which are true, some of which are not. It's a beer that dates back to the early 1800s or late 1700s. Originated in which country? I'll give you a clue. It's the country I'm from. Yes, England. Originated in England. So it was being shipped, beers were being shipped around the world. Alcohol's a natural preservative. Hops are a natural preservative. That's why we don't use sulfur in beers like wine does. I've got a vendetta against wine today, apparently. It wasn't invented for the purpose of being shipped around the world. It was just noted that beers that were higher in alcohol and higher in hops were surviving the journey better, weren't sour, because there was no refrigeration on these ships, right? The original beers that were being shipped that were higher in alcohol and that were higher in hops were not pale ales. They were porters. They were darker beers. It's just as trends changed in England, beer trends changed, they became pale ales. Didn't become known as India Pale Ale for a long time. And they were called things like, pale ale brewed for the Indian export market or something catchy like that. And then someone with a bit of marketing chutzpah actually came up with India Pale Ale. The style kind of died out. A lot of styles died out after the Second World War, or during it, or between the 2 world wars. There became less variety in beer in England, a lot more big lager, a lot less specialty ales, and the English IPA was an endangered species for a while. It still kind of is, to be honest with you. The beer that probably, when I said who's tasted an IPA and you raised your hand, the IPA you're talking about probably is not the English IPA. It is the American IPA. So the American IPA comes now along in the sort of 80s in the craft beer revolution in the States. And they took this beer and turned it into something completely unrecognizable. If you somehow travel back in time and gave an American IPA to a British sailor in the 1840s, he'd be like, "What the hell is this?" I need to be careful about swearing now. I've got the microphone. Note to self. So the Americans took this beer. They made it more pale. They made it a bit more bitter. The English IPA is pretty bitter. Less malty and much, much hoppier. American hops are very different to English hops. English hops are sort of earthy, spicy, kind of quite subtle. American hops are not. They are brash and in your face, fruity, big sort of, bam, hello, I'm an American hop, punch you in the face flavor. The IPA became the poster child for craft beer globally. It changed the beer industry completely. It actually gives me goosebumps. it made beer. Everybody wants to drink this beer. Many years ago in South Africa, people at festivals, you'd hear people go, "Do you have any IPAs?" This person's probably never even had an IPA because there weren't really many in South Africa at this time. But they know this is the beer that they want to have. This is craft beer. IPA is craft beer. So it's like, if you've got any IPAs, and now, thankfully, there are plenty. One of which we are going to taste now. In the BJCP guidelines, I've counted up, I think there's 10 versions of the IPA. There's the English, the American, black IPA, white IPA, brown IPA, blue, no, I'm not kidding about the blue, red IPA, I've lost count, Belgian IPA, New England IPA. I'm not sure if Brut IPA is yet in the guidelines or not, it is, and Imperial IPA. Cold IPA has not made it yet. Sorry? Oh, and rye IPA. Yes, the rye IPA. I've missed that one all day. So we're on 11 or 12. We're tasting the American IPA. They sort of plays on the same. They tend to have the same hop character, which is the important bit. It was cool that at the beginning you said bitter and hoppy. People often think about hoppy as being bitter. It's not the same thing, right? Bitter is bitter, and hoppy is about the hop aroma and the hop flavor. Hopefully, you're going to experience both. So my station is very strict. We're going to start with aroma. You're not allowed to taste the beer until you're told you're allowed to taste the beer. We've only had one dissenter so far. 2 if you include me. It's very tempting. So the important thing here is that you write something on your paper. I don't care what it is almost. Well, I do. I mean, don't write swear words and stuff. Well, you can. If you think it's an effing good beer, you can write that down. No, but I want you to just try and put into words what you're smelling for the first one, okay? Anything is fine. You know, if you put fruity, it's a great start. And then we can try and work out what kind of fruits. It works, you know, the more specific you can be. If you're interested in going into beer judging and taking the exam, the more specific you can be, the better. Fruity is a good base. Citrus fruit is better. Naartjie is better than citrus fruit, or lime, or lemon, or whatever you're picking up. Fresh naartjie versus frozen naartjie, I'm not quite sure where I'm going with this, is better. Naartjie peel is even better. So the more specific you can be, the better score you will get in the exam. I'm not expecting you to do this today. If you can write naartjie, that'd be amazing, assuming it smells like that. So I want you to I want you to just smell the beer and write down whatever comes to mind. Your first impression is going to be right. Don't second guess yourself. Don't look at what the person next to you is writing. You're going to perceive things differently. You know, I mean, what you smell and taste can't be wrong. I had a guy once in an off-flavors tasting who said the beer smelled like, and I quote, the inside of a tennis ball. I don't know what that smells like. I've never been presented with a cut open tennis ball to sniff. I might do it one day just to find out what was going on. But to him, that was what he was picking up. And now, if he finds that off flavor in beer, he knows it's that. It doesn't matter that I have no idea what that smells like. To him, that aroma is inside of tennis ball. Okay, so it's important that you trust your nose, trust your palate. Right, less talking, more drinking. This extra level of difficulty when you've only got one hand. So, bottle opener. Okay, is the bottle opener somewhere? I have left it somewhere, or someone's taken it. Guys, if you've got a bottle opener, please open. Pour yourself, about half a glass. I'm just going to try and find the bottle opener. Have you got an opener? Can you open on that side? I can't do it with a lighter. You can open through. Oh, okay. I thought you meant like. Sorry, I can't do it with one hand. Thank you. I don't know where my opener went. Thanks. Okay, so pour yourself, half a glass. Thank you very much. Get your nose right in there, have a sniff, write down whatever comes to mind. Oh, I'm forgetting the microphone. Write down whatever comes to mind. If you're struggling, take little short sniffs. and then go away from it. If it's getting, because it's got quite an aroma, the IPA is quite an easy beer to judge because it's got plenty going on. Judging lagers is really hard because you're like, oh, I don't know, it doesn't really, it smells like Castle. If you're struggling, go back and like do something like you can smell your arm like this, or smell a piece of paper or something, just to get a different smell in your nose and then come back to the beer. Okay, like 2 minutes to have a quick smell and write down something. Everybody must write something. I'm just coming to steal from you guys. It's thirsty work, this. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to give just 1 minute to write something down, and then we'll quickly talk about aroma. You don't. I'm not going to ask you to like stand up and read out your paper, but I will ask you to shout out words. If you don't want to talk to me, just don't make eye contact. So random talking into a microphone is not working. Usually people hand me a microphone, I'm going to sing. You know how it goes. I don't even need to hang my microphone and I'll still sing. That'll be tonight's entertainment. Okay, just wait a second. I want to make sure everyone's got something written down. Okay, I think everybody's got something. Shout out words at me. What are you picking up? Guava. Perfect. Citrus. What kind of citrus? Is anyone else picking up citrus? Okay, yeah, so citrus, yeah. No, so not the fruit, the hops. Someone else said citrus. Is there a specific kind of citrus that you're picking up? Lime. Okay. Any other fruits that people are picking up? We've got guava, we've got citrus, we've got lime. Does anyone pick up any malt flavors from this beer? Any biscuit or toffee or toast, bread, caramel, anything like that? A light toast? I mean, the thing is, comes down to style. It is not a malty beer. That's over there. This is the hoppy station, you know? So if you're not picking up any malt, that's perfectly fine. It's not. I was going to say it's not a trick question. It was a trick question. Okay, quick look at it. How would you describe the color of this beer? Gold? Yep, medium gold we've got. We had honey gold earlier on. I think gold is a very solid description. So there's three things that you're looking at with appearance. You're looking at the color, you're looking at the clarity, and you're looking at the head. With the head, you're looking at the color, you're looking at the texture. So is it like big fat Coke bubbles, or is it more moussey? You know, like when you shampoo your hair and the lather that comes off that, is it more like that? You know, you're looking at the texture. And then the head retention, which is how long the head lasts. Okay? So the color of the head of this beer? White. Yeah, we've had white or off-white as descriptors. It's not, you know, it's not an exciting thing to describe. What about the head retention? How would you describe the head retention? So would you say it's long-lasting? If you look at yours in particular, maybe it's, okay. Yeah, it does. It has. Everybody's beer still has foam on top. Some people's has quite a lot. It depends a little bit how you, like if you swirl like this a lot, you'll get the foam and then it will fall. So if you don't mess around with your glass too much, you know the swirling that goes on in wine, keep it to a minimum in beer because you'll lose carbonation if you're doing the big swirl. A little swirl, but that's more if you're struggling to get aroma. With this beer, you're not going to struggle to get aroma. You know, I think of all of them. I haven't tasted any of the others today, but I would assume this is the one with the biggest aroma. Right, time. Taste it. Taste it. Drink some of it. It does it. Really? I'd like to take credit for that. Okay. When you're tasting, What I want you to look for with this beer is any hop flavor. Okay, so are you still picking up those fruity flavors or grassy or pine? Are you, not that I'm suggesting that you guys eat grass or pine, but you could have an idea of what it might taste like. Are you still picking up tropical fruits or citrus fruits? And if so, what is that like? Are there any malt flavors coming through? There may be, there may not be. The other thing I would like you to focus on is the bitterness level of this beer. Would you say it's sweet? Would you say it's medium bitter? Would you say it's assertive bitterness? Would you say it's aggressive bitterness? So just think, have a taste of it and feel like, how is that bitterness level for you? Not for anybody else, doesn't matter, for you. Where are you sending this? No, now I'm like super self-conscious. Maybe my cheeks are red. Okay, raise your hand if you have written something in the flavor section. If you have written something, raise your hand. Okay, we're getting there. We're still writing. Even if you only comment on the bitterness. Like for you, I've had a lot of good facial expressions on my station today where people taste and go. It's like when you give a lemon thing to a baby, and you get that reaction, which is fine. So maybe you can, I hope you didn't take that photo of that face. That's the worst thing ever. Okay, let's look at a hop flavor. Do you pick up similar flavors as the aroma? What flavors are you picking up? Citrus. For me, I get grapefruit, particularly on this bottle, more so than earlier. Yeah, okay, so peel, so citrus peel, because that's bitter. The pith of it is bitter, yeah. Any other fruitiness or like pine flavors? And piney. Any malt character? Is anyone picking up any like caramel or toffee, biscuity? I mean, so what you're saying is the bitterness dominates. There is a little bit of malt. And there has to be a little bit of malt, right? Otherwise, there wouldn't be any alcohol in it. And it wouldn't be golden. But, I mean, it is a hop-forward style. It's not... The malt is a very much a supporting role. The protagonist here is the hops. Bitterness level. Okay. If this is sweet, me standing here, and this is like a medium bitterness, this would be assertive bitterness. This would be aggressive bitterness. Where should I be standing? Here. Whoop. Here. More. Here. Okay, this is going to vary from person to person, right? Does anybody feel that I should possibly be standing over here? Because a couple of people in the previous group were like, they're the ones with the real. So this is... the way you perceive bitterness is going to differ from person to person. There is something, you may have heard the term super taster. It was actually something we were going to look into this weekend. However, so when you hear it, I was like, oh, I want to be a super taster. Like I do so much beer tasting and beer judging. I'd like to have that feather in my cap. Being a super taster is not a good thing in beer. So there used to be this exhibition thing in Cape Town about food. And drinks. And they had this little station where there was a piece of paper in an envelope, and you're supposed to put it on your tongue. And if it tasted bitter to you, you're a super taster. And I went with a wine writer friend of mine, wine judge friend. She tasted and she was like, oh, God, this is revolting. And I was like, I just put a piece of paper in my mouth for absolutely no reason. There was nothing. It was just a piece of paper. Turns out she's a super taster. Super in this context doesn't mean awesome. It means sensitive. She doesn't like beer at all. And that day I realized why. When I started reading into the super taster, you're very sensitive to bitterness and also to chili heat, to spice. She can't eat anything spicy. I think super tasters are terrible. Like, that kind of sucks for me. Like I love bitterness and I love... So you need to work out where your threshold of bitterness is. So if you go into beer judging, you can... sort of allow for that. Now, my threshold for bitterness is high. I love bitter beers. That's why I'm on this station. I have never found, there was one homebrew once that maybe could have dialed a little bit back on the hops, but I still drank it. Everybody else is like scraping the tongue off, and I was like, so it's kind of bitter. I would have made a really bad hunter-gatherer, because like berries that are poisonous or bitter, and I'd be like, hey family, I found these berries that taste great, I'll make a pie, and then they would have died. So for me, when I judge, I know that my threshold for bitterness is very high. So if I think a beer is not bitter enough for the style, and the other judges are saying it's spot on, then I will admit that I'm wrong. That I know. And if if you feel that I should be standing somewhere over there with this beer, you're hypersensitive to bitterness, I guess, or more sensitive, not hypersensitive. So you just need to know that when you're judging, and then if you're like, oh God, no, this is terrible, you need to listen to what the other judges are saying. And if they all think it's okay, then it's your bitterness threshold. It will change the more IPAs it's the same as with like chili heat. The more you have of it, the more accustomed you become to it, and then your sensitivity to it does decrease. You can, if you go into judging, you can opt out of certain styles. So for example, if you're really sensitive to bitterness, maybe judging IPAs is not the best idea, because you're not going to maybe score them fairly. We're not going to go really into mouthfeel. It's the least sexy part of the score sheet. But just what you're looking at in mouthfeel is carbonation. So for this, would you say it's low, medium, high? Medium? Yeah, for the style, it should be between medium, high. Just as an aside, if you look at the guidelines, if any of you are interested in going into beer judging, download the BJCP Guidelines app. It's a very cool app, and then when you're having a beer, you can kind of read through it. It's very helpful for your beers that you're entering in the competition as well, because you can taste your beers with the guidelines and go, whew, that didn't quite work out. Sometimes people are a bit sneaky and they move it to a different category because, it tastes more like that category. Peace, man. I totally lost my train of thought there. Something about guidelines. It's gone. It's completely gone. I blame Troy for this completely. Anyway, it'll come back to me. Talking about carbonation, then do so. Get into judging. Mic drop. I've forgotten. I'll come and find you each individually later when I remember what I was trying to say. Coming back to mouthfeel, you're looking at things like astringency, which is not the same as bitterness. Astringency almost makes you feel like all the moisture's been just gone from your mouth. You get it in big, bold, very wooded wines, for example. And it sort of makes you... It's usually a bad thing in beer. There's some examples, some exceptions. And you're looking at the finish of the beer as well. Is it like a long finish? This has got a pretty long, bitter finish. I think you'd probably agree. The overall impression is when you're judging, it's where... Oh, I've just remembered what I was going to say. Because I was talking about medium to high bitterness. So when you look at the guidelines, which you're all going to download this weekend, because you're all going to become beer judges and you're going to come judge in my competition. Thank you. The African Beer Cup. Please follow us on social media. I didn't do this once, but now I've got the microphone in my hand. I can't seem to help myself. So in the guidelines, it will say things like low to medium level of bitterness or medium to high carbonation. When you're judging, you can't write medium to high, because when you have one beer, it's not medium to high. It's either medium or medium high or high. So those are the guidelines, because within those guidelines, there might be globally 10,000 beers that fit into that guideline. Some of them will be medium, some of them will be high. I use the example with the other group that if sometimes it says low to no hop aroma, which is already a bit sad, but low to no hop aroma. So some examples will be low, some will be no, but you can't write as a judge low to no hop aroma. Either it's low or it's no. If I offer you a job and I say it's low to no salary, you're going to go, well, either way, I don't want it. But is it low or is it no? Those are very different things. It's the same if I say it's medium to high salary. Okay, I'm interested, but which one is it, medium or high? So when you're judging, you need to be specific. That's how you do well in the exam, is being specific. Okay, overall impression of this beer. I want you to give it a score out of 5 by holding up the number of fingers that you would rate this beer out of 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. Raise your hands. What would you score it? A 5, a 4, 3s. We've got some halves. Yeah, we can do halves. Guys, how would you score this beer? Hello. How would you score this beer out of 5? 3? 4? 4? Did anyone score it below a 3? Okay, good. So, I mean, we're not actually doing scoring for the thing, but in one of the other groups, someone scored a 2. She was very sensitive to bitterness. And it was a good example because I could point out that she was letting her personal preference about beer get into it, which for the purposes of this exercise is perfectly fine. But when you're judging, it doesn't matter if you like that style of beer. Nobody cares. Sorry, sad but true. It's about, did the brewer achieve what they set out to do? And it's kind of what you guys do with the competition, right? When you're entering the competition, we're judging your beers tomorrow to the BJCP guidelines. So where you enter them is important, and you achieving what you set out to achieve. You know, if you set out to brew an IPA and it ended up being a stout, something went wrong. Quite a lot went wrong. So somebody asked me about the importance of style with the consumer. Now, your average consumer doesn't know what the BJCP is. They don't know beer judging is a thing. They don't care, and that's fine. But styles are important if you want to sell your beers. You know, if you put IPA on the label and I buy your beer, it had better be hoppy and bitter. Because if it's not, you know, it's like if you go to a restaurant and you order a steak, and then they bring you out some ground beef on a plate with some onions on top, and you're like, no, sorry, I ordered the steak. And they go, oh, no, this is the chef's interpretation of a steak. You're like, well, I don't want the chef's interpretation of a steak. I want a steak. When I order, so sometimes I'll get an IPA and then I'll say to her, listen, the bitterness level is way, even for me, like, it's not bitter enough and it doesn't have hop aroma. Oh, no, I wanted to dial it back because, like, my consumers don't like bitterness. Then your consumers don't want an IPA. Call it something else. But if I spend my $40 a bottle for an IPA, I expect an IPA inside the bottle. So while the general public doesn't know about brown IPA, rye IPA, all this stuff, it does still matter what it says on the label. You know, so the style is still somewhat important. Well, it's very important. Okay, I believe it's probably lunchtime. Does anybody have any questions about beer judging or about IPA? I've got a hand.
I remember at one lecture that we got given, they said that for the BJCP you can't score below 13. Is that, because it says 0 to 13. Yeah.
No, that's it. So the question was can you score below 13 in the BJCP? The answer is no. 13 is basically 0. So you can't score below. It's literally like a courtesy thing. If you get a 13, you know your beer was garbage, basically. But like getting a 0 is, I think, even more demoralizing. So it's almost like a gentleman's handshake that the minimum score that you give is a 13. And a beer has got to be really bad to get a 13. Any other questions about IPAs or about judging? I'm actually talking about judging tomorrow as well.
Is this not a problem if there are too many similar scores? Like a couple of the other people talked about, like, you know, you can get like a 46 and two 45s. And like, how much can you really tell between them?
Okay, so the question about the too many beers getting a similar score. What usually happens is you get then a mini best of show. So it can be quite difficult because if we split these, usually you judge in groups of 3. So if we split you all into groups of 3, you judge different beers. Maybe you're really mean with your scores. So your highest score on your table is a 36. You're really generous with your scores, and the highest score on your table is a 42. And you guys are, you know, also kind of mean, and the highest score that you've given is like a 29. None of your beers now are going through to best of show. So what often happens is you take the top 2 from each table to put them, and then they get tasted. They don't get rejudged with all the writing. They get tasted against each other. And there should always be some kind of a mini best of show, which is where sort of maybe within the category, they go up against each other. And then the best of show, where the highest scoring will go up against each other. Different competitions do it in different ways. But in the African Beer Cup, we judge everything twice, and then an average is taken. when you judge within your group, you're supposed to be within 7 points of each other. So if you've given it a 26 and you've given it a 29 and you've given it a 43, we have a problem. So you need to discuss, and either he's going to have to bow out, or you're going to have to change, work out why you scored it so highly. And what we do in the African Beer Cup is if it gets a points difference of more than 7, it gets judged again. So it's not a flawless system. There is no such thing in beer. And also your personal thing is always going to come into it to some extent. All right, guys, thank you very much. If you have any beer judging related questions this weekend, please come and find me. I could talk about beer judging for hours. Enjoy the rest of your day. Let's go to a brewery, I believe. I've just remembered what's happening. Thank you.